My mother's smile froze the moment my grandfather mentioned the villa. I didn't understand why. I didn't even know I had a villa. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. From the moment I pulled into my parents' driveway and felt that familiar knot form in my stomach. The drive from my apartment to my parents' house was exactly 37 miles. I knew this because I had driven it hundreds of times, counting the exits, watching the mile markers tick by. Like a countdown to something I was never quite prepared for. Family dinner, 2 words that made most people think of warmth and laughter and home-cooked meals. 2 words that made me think of carefully navigating landmines while pretending everything was fine. I pulled into the driveway at exactly 6, not 5:58, not 6:02, exactly 6 because my mother had made it very clear over the course of 26 years that lateness was a sign of disrespect and earliness was an inconvenience. Tyler's BMW was already there, gleaming black, brand new. The third one he'd owned since college because he traded up every 2 years like clockwork. My 9-year-old Honda sat beside it like a servant next to a prince. But there was another car I didn't recognize, a dark blue sedan, older model, but meticulously maintained. The kind of car that had been loved and cared for over many years. I stared at it for a long moment before it clicked. Grandpa. My grandfather rarely came to these dinners anymore. He said the drive from his place was getting harder at 78. But I suspected the real reason was my mother. They had never gotten along. Not since she married my father 30 years ago. Something about her rubbed him the wrong way, and Grandpa Henry was not a man who pretended otherwise. I grabbed the bottle of wine I'd brought, nothing expensive because my mother would find something wrong with it regardless, and headed inside. The foyer smelled like roast beef and tension. My mother appeared before I'd even closed the door, her heels clicking against the marble tile. She air-kissed my cheek without actually making contact, a skill she'd perfected over decades. "Harper, you made it." Her tone suggested she'd expected me to cancel, or hoped I would. "Hi, Mom. Tyler's in the living room with your grandfather. Your father's finishing up in the kitchen." She took the wine bottle from my hands, glanced at the label with the briefest flicker of disdain, and set it on the hallway table. It would end up in the back of a cabinet I knew, unopened, forgotten. Like most things I contributed to this family, I found them exactly where she said. Tyler was sprawled on the leather couch, scrolling through his phone with the casual entitlement of someone who had never been denied anything in his life. He was 29 years old and still acted like a frat boy who'd stumbled into a corner office. Grandpa sat in the armchair by the window. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't making small talk. He was watching. Those sharp blue eyes moving between Tyler and the doorway, missing nothing, cataloging everything. Something was different about him tonight. I couldn't put my finger on it. A tension in his shoulders, a purpose in his stillness. "Grandpa?" I bent down to hug him, and his arms wrapped around me with surprising strength for a man his age. "There's my girl." He held me for an extra moment, his hand patting my back twice. "You look tired, sweetheart." "Work's been busy." He pulled back, studying my face with those piercing eyes. "We'll talk later. There are things we need to discuss." A chill ran down my spine, not from fear, from something else. Anticipation, maybe, or premonition. Tyler finally deigned to look up from his phone. "Hey, sis." Looking comfortable, his eyes swept over my simple blouse and jeans, lingering just long enough to make his judgment clear. "Thanks, Tyler. Looking expensive." He smirked and went back to his phone. Conversation over. That was the extent of our sibling relationship. Quick jabs and quicker dismissals. I sat down near Grandpa. And that's when the memory surfaced, unbidden, unwelcome. 15 years buried, suddenly clawing its way back. I was 11 years old, sitting on Grandpa's back porch in the summer heat. He had his old camera out, the one he used to document everything he loved. He was showing me photos, mountains, snow-capped peaks against an impossibly blue sky. A wooden cabin nestled among pine trees, smoke curling from its chimney. "Someday," he'd said, his voice soft with promise, "this will be yours, your special place. Somewhere you can go when the world gets too loud." I had forgotten about that conversation entirely. 15 years of forgetting. Why had I forgotten? "Dinner's ready," my mother announced from the doorway. Her smile perfect, her eyes hard. "Let's eat." Dinner was the usual performance. Tyler talked about his latest promotion. regional vice president of something impressive at the company my mother's connections had gotten him into, fresh out of college. My mother hung on every word, asking follow-up questions, making impressed sounds at all the right moments. My father nodded along and passed dishes when asked. He had mastered the art of being present without being involved, a skill I'd watched him develop over my entire childhood. No one asked about my job. No one asked about my life. I was wallpaper, background noise, the daughter who had somehow failed to become anything worth discussing. Grandpa was quiet throughout the meal, too quiet. He answered questions with single words and spent most of his time watching, always watching. His fork moved methodically from plate to mouth, but his eyes never stopped scanning the table. It wasn't until my mother brought out dessert that everything changed. She was slicing her famous apple pie, the one she only made for special occasions, the one that took her all day to prepare. When Grandpa set down his fork with a deliberate clink against the china, "I have an announcement," he said. The room went still. Even Tyler put down his phone. Grandpa smiled. Not his warm smile, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes when he hugged me. This was different, sharper, the smile of a man about to overturn a chessboard. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice calm and clear, "I'm going to visit the mountain villa I bought for my granddaughter." My mother's hand slipped. The pie server clattered against the dish, sending a spray of apple filling across the white tablecloth. Tyler's face went white. Actually white, like someone had reached inside him and drained all the blood from his cheeks in a single moment. I looked between them, utterly confused. "Grandpa, what villa?" His eyes found mine, soft now, a little sad, like he was about to deliver news he wished he didn't have to deliver. "The one I bought for you 15 years ago, Harper. In Colorado, up in the mountains near Aspen. Do you remember the photos I showed you? The memory from earlier crashed into me. The porch, the camera, the mountains. I shook my head, trying to make sense of what he was saying. "I don't have a villa, Grandpa. I think I would know if I owned property in Colorado." "Would you?" Something dark flickered in his eyes. "Would you really?" From his jacket pocket he pulled a folded piece of paper, old, yellowed at the edges, creased from years of being stored somewhere safe. He unfolded it slowly, deliberately, and slid it across the table toward me. I picked it up with trembling fingers. A receipt, dated 15 years ago. Property purchase 1 Mountain Villa, Colorado. The buyer's name, Henry Edward Whitmore. The beneficiary, Harper Elizabeth Whitmore. My name, my middle name, my exact birthday listed for verification. "I don't understand," I whispered. "If you bought this for me, why don't I know about it? Why has no one ever mentioned it?" "Dad!" My father's voice was too loud, too bright, shattering the moment like a rock through glass. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor with an ugly screech. "Let's not confuse Harper. The villa is in Tyler's name now. It has been for years. For paperwork reasons, tax purposes. You know how complicated these things can be. Paperwork reasons, tax purposes." I looked at my father, at the sweat beading on his forehead, at the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes. Grandpa's voice could have frozen fire. "Interesting. This is all a misunderstanding." My mother had recovered her composure, that smooth mask sliding back into place, like she'd never lost it. "Dad, you're getting confused. These things happen at your age. The property was always meant to be a family asset, and Tyler has been managing it beautifully. Managing it," Grandpa cut her off. His voice was quiet. That was worse than if he'd shouted. "Or living in it, because my investigator tells me Tyler has been spending every holiday at that villa for the past 5 years. Hosting parties, bringing friends, treating it like his personal vacation home. My investigator." The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Tyler finally found his voice. "Grandpa, look, this is being blown way out of proportion. Yes, I've used the villa. Someone had to maintain it. Harper wasn't going to. She's barely keeping her apartment together." The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. Like I wasn't even in the room, like my failures were common knowledge discussed regularly, laughed about behind my back. Whether Harper was going to use it or not, Grandpa said each word precise as a scalpel, is irrelevant. It was hers, I bought it for her, and someone transferred it without her knowledge or consent. He reached into his jacket again, more papers, a whole stack of them this time. He spread them on the table like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "Property transfer records," he said. "Dated 5 years ago, signed by Harper Elizabeth Whitmore, transferring full ownership to Tyler James Whitmore for the sum of $1. $1. They hadn't even bothered to make it look legitimate. He pushed one page toward me. "Is this your signature, Harper?" I stared at the paper. There it was, my name written in what was almost my handwriting. Almost, but not quite. Like someone had practiced copying it but hadn't spent quite enough time getting it right. "I've never seen this document in my life." "Look closer," Grandpa said. "Look at the signature itself." I looked, and then I saw it. The thing that made my blood run cold. The lowercase I in my first name, dotted with a simple point. I have never, not once in my entire life, dotted an I with a point. Since 7th grade, when my best friend Melissa taught me the trick, I've used a small circle. Every time, every signature, every note. A tiny quirk that had become as automatic as breathing. Anyone who had ever watched me sign anything would know that. "I don't dot my I's like that," I said slowly. "I use a circle. I've always used a circle." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Tick, 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 like a countdown to something terrible. Tyler's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Once, twice. "Harper, honestly." My mother's laugh was desperate now, a wounded animal trying to escape a trap. "You probably just forgot. It was 5 years ago. Signatures change. People evolve." "My signature hasn't changed since I was 13. I looked at her, really looked. Saw the fear beneath the polish, the cracks in the foundation she'd spent a lifetime building. "You know that, Mom. You've seen me sign birthday cards, permission slips, Christmas presents. You've watched me write my name thousands of times." She said nothing. "This is ridiculous." She turned to my father, her voice sharpening into something that sounded almost like a threat. "Chris, say something. Defend your son." My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked like a man drowning in water too deep to touch bottom. "Kim," he said quietly, and even in that single syllable, I heard something breaking. "Kim, maybe we should just... Maybe it's time to... Time to what? Time to let your father destroy this family with his accusations." She whirled on Grandpa, finger pointing like a weapon. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything." Grandpa's voice was steady as stone, unmovable, unshakable. "I'm stating a fact. That signature is not Harper's, which means someone forged it, which means someone committed a felony." My head was spinning. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in and pulling away at the same time. 5 years. For 5 years, I had been walking around thinking I was ordinary, unremarkable, the daughter who got nothing because she deserved nothing. And the whole time something had been stolen from me. Not just property, not just money, but the knowledge that someone had believed in me. That my grandfather had looked at me when I was 11 years old and seen something worth investing in, something worth protecting. And my own family had taken that from me. Tyler pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the floor. "Look, everyone needs to calm down. This is a big misunderstanding. The transfer was completely legitimate. I have lawyers, documents, everything was done by the book." By the book. I heard my own voice as if from a distance, strange, hollow. "I didn't sign anything, Tyler. I didn't agree to anything. I didn't even know this property existed until 15 minutes ago." "You probably forgot," he said quickly. Too quickly. The lie sitting on his tongue like something rotten. "It was 5 years ago. You were busy, distracted. You came to the house, signed some papers Mom asked you to sign, and then forgot about it. It happens. I would remember signing away a mountain villa, Tyler. Would you?" His voice took on a mocking edge. "Would you really, because you forget things all the time, Harper? You forgot Mom's birthday last year. You forgot Dad's retirement party. You forgot..." "I didn't forget those things." The words came out harder than I expected. "I wasn't invited to those things. There's a difference." Something flickered across Tyler's face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. He hadn't expected me to push back. Nobody ever expected me to push back. "Grandpa showed you pictures when you were little," he said, changing tactics. "Remember, you told us about it once? The cabin in the mountains, you said it looked like a fairy tale." I froze. The memory from earlier came rushing back, sharper now, clearer. Grandpa's porch, the summer heat, the photos on his camera, his voice warm with promise. "I remember," I said slowly. "I was 11. He showed me pictures. He said someday it would be mine, my special place. I turned to my grandfather. His eyes were gentle now, filled with something that looked terribly like grief. "You remembered," he said softly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I forgot. For years, I forgot." My throat tightened around the words. How did I forget something like that? "Because no one ever mentioned it again," Grandpa said. "Because someone made very sure you wouldn't think about it, wouldn't ask about it, wouldn't wonder why your grandfather's gift never seemed to materialize." He looked at my mother, a long, steady look that said more than words ever could. She looked away first. "Kim," my father's voice was barely a whisper, the voice of a man watching his world crumble. "Kim, what did you do?" "I did what was best for this family." She spun around, her composure finally shattering like glass against concrete. "Harper was never going to use that property. She can barely keep a houseplant alive." Tyler had plans, vision. He was going to develop it, turn it into something valuable, something that would benefit everyone. "It wasn't yours to give," Grandpa said. "It was sitting there wasted. It was Harper's." My mother's face twisted into something ugly, something I had never seen before, or maybe something I had always seen but refused to acknowledge. Harper who can barely hold down a job. Harper who never finishes anything she starts. Harper who has done nothing but disappoint us since the day she was born. The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing in a place that had been bruised so many times it didn't even hurt anymore. Just a dull, familiar ache. "Stop," my voice came out stronger than I expected. Strong enough that everyone turned to look at me. "Just stop." My mother blinked. Surprised. I was surprised too. I never interrupted her. I never raised my voice. I was the quiet one, the easy one, the one who kept the peace at any cost. But some costs were too high. "You stole from me," I said. The words felt like fire in my throat. Burning, cleansing. "You and Tyler, you forged my signature and you stole what Grandpa gave me. What he wanted me to have. And you let me walk around for 5 years thinking I was nothing, that I deserved nothing." I turned to my grandfather. "What do we do now?" Grandpa rose from his chair. At 78, his movements were careful, deliberate. The joints that had carried him through decades of business deals and family battles protesting each motion. But there was something in his posture that reminded me of old photographs I'd seen. A young man in a suit standing outside his first office. A middle-aged man shaking hands with senators. A man who had built an empire from nothing but determination and an unwillingness to lose. "Now," he said, and his voice filled the room like thunder rolling across distant mountains, "we find out the truth." He pulled out his phone, showed us a text message on the screen. "My lawyer," he explained. "I've had him investigating this matter for the past 2 months, since I first discovered the transfer while updating my estate plans." My mother went pale, genuinely pale, the color draining from her face like water from a sink. "You've been investigating for 2 months without telling anyone." "I've been gathering evidence." Grandpa tucked the phone away. "Including scheduling a forensic handwriting analysis for tomorrow morning. A specialist who will examine that signature and provide expert testimony about its authenticity." Tyler made a sound, a small choked sound, like an animal caught in a trap and only now realizing the jaws were closing. "Tomorrow," Grandpa continued, his voice calm as still water, "we drive to that villa, all of us, together, and we see exactly what has been done with my granddaughter's property. We meet with my lawyers, we review the evidence, and we determine exactly who forged Harper's signature on those transfer documents." He looked at each of us in turn. My father, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the past hour, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. Tyler, whose California tan had faded to something gray, and sick sweat beating at his temples despite the cool air conditioning. My mother, whose perfect facade had crumbled into something desperate and dangerous, a cornered animal baring its teeth. And finally, he looked at me. He looked at me the longest. "I'm sorry, Harper," he said quietly. "I should have checked on this years ago. I trusted that my family would do the right thing. I trusted that your parents would honor my wishes. I won't make that mistake again." "Dad." My mother's voice cracked the first genuine emotion I'd heard from her all night. Fear, pure, undiluted fear. "Dad, please. This is a family matter. We can handle it internally. There's no need for lawyers and investigators and handwriting experts. We can work this out. Forgery is a felony in Colorado, Kim. Grandpa's voice was cold. Final, a judge passing sentence. This stopped being a family matter the moment someone committed a crime against my granddaughter. He picked up the original receipt from the table, the one he'd shown me, 15 years old and still preserved a promise written on paper. He folded it carefully, deliberately, and tucked it back into his jacket pocket. This receipt says I purchased this property for Harper Elizabeth Whitmore. He buttoned his jacket, straightened his tie, and tomorrow I intend to make sure she gets what's rightfully hers. My mother opened her mouth to argue. Tyler knocked over his wine glass. Red spread across the white tablecloth like a blood stain seeping into the expensive fabric. My father put his head in his hands and didn't move. And Grandpa smiled, not a warm smile, not a kind smile, not the smile he gave me when I was 11 years old, showing me pictures of my future. The smile of a man who had spent 78 years learning how to win, and who had no intention of losing now. Tomorrow, he said softly, looking directly at my mother with eyes that held no mercy. We find out who signed your gift away. He turned to me, extended his hand. His grip was warm and steady when I took it. And then, Harper, we take it back. We left at dawn. The sky was still gray when Grandpa pulled up to my apartment building in his blue sedan, the same car that had been sitting in my parents' driveway 12 hours earlier. The same car that had carried him to that dinner like a general arriving at a battlefield he had spent months preparing for. I hadn't slept. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, that twist of ugly desperation when her mask finally cracked. The hatred underneath all those years of polite smiles and air kisses. 26 years of thinking I was the problem, and it turned out I was just in the way. You look tired, Grandpa said as I climbed into the passenger seat. I look how I feel. He nodded and pulled away from the curb. The city was quiet at this hour, streets empty except for delivery trucks and early commuters. We drove in silence until we hit the highway heading west. The first hints of sunrise, painting the horizon in shades of pink and gold. I should have told you years ago, Grandpa said finally. About the villa. About what I'd planned for you. I should have checked on it, made sure the transfer went through properly. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a long moment. The mountains were growing larger on the horizon, snow-capped peaks catching the early light. I trusted your parents. I thought Kim was difficult, but I never imagined she would do something like this. Not to her own daughter, not to a child. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. I was a fool. How did you finally find out? I'm getting old, Harper. He said it matter-of-factly, no self-pity. Just acknowledgement of reality. 78 years old. Years. My bones ache in the morning. I forget names sometimes. My lawyer suggested I review my estate, make sure everything was in order for when I'm gone. Make sure the people I love are taken care of. And that's when you discovered the transfer. That's when I discovered the transfer. 2 months ago. I thought there must be some mistake. Some paperwork error. So I had Mitchell investigate. And the more he dug, the uglier it got. The forged signature. The forged signature. The transfer for $1. The fact that Tyler has been using that property as his personal vacation home for 5 years while you didn't even know it existed. His jaw clenched. I've made a lot of money in my life, Harper. Built companies from nothing, made deals that changed industries. But the thing I was always most proud of was my family, the legacy I was building. He paused. Now I find out part of that family has been stealing from another part. And I won't let that stand. I looked out the window at the passing landscape. Flat plains giving way to rolling hills, the first real mountains rising in the distance, like promises waiting to be kept. What happens now? I asked. Now we see exactly what they've done with your property. And then we decide what to do about it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, the handwriting analysis. Arrived at my house at 6 this morning. Rush job. He handed it to me. Go ahead, open it. I slid my finger under the seal. Inside was a single page covered in technical language and professional letterhead. But the conclusion at the bottom was clear enough for anyone to understand. Signature inconsistent with genuine samples. High probability of forgery. Proof, I whispered. Proof, Grandpa agreed. Now we just need to decide what to do with it. The villa was beautiful. That was the first thing I noticed when we pulled up the winding mountain road and it came into view. Nestled among towering pine trees, with a wraparound deck of honey-colored wood and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the snow-capped peaks beyond. The roof was steep, designed to shed snow, and smoke curled from a stone chimney that spoke of cozy fires and winter nights. It looked exactly like the photos Grandpa had shown me 15 years ago, but somehow more real, more present, more mine. This could have been mine, I thought. All these years while I was struggling to pay rent in a cramped apartment, this was sitting here, waiting. We weren't alone. My parents' car was already parked in the circular driveway, and Tyler's black BMW sat beside it, chrome gleaming in the morning sun. They had raced ahead, probably leaving shortly after we did, trying to get here first. To do what I didn't know. Clean up evidence, prepare their defense, rehearse their lies. A third car sat at the end of the drive. A sleek silver sedan I didn't recognize. Grandpa's lawyer, I realized. A man named Mitchell who had been working with my grandfather for decades and looked like he'd spent 50 years winning courtroom battles with no intention of stopping now. "Ready?" Grandpa asked, putting the car in park. I wasn't. My stomach was churning, my hands were trembling, and part of me wanted to tell him to turn around and drive away, to forget about all of this, to go back to my small safe life where I was invisible, but at least not hated. But I nodded anyway. Inside the villa was even more stunning than I'd imagined. Vaulted ceilings rose 2 stories above a great room dominated by a massive stone fireplace. Leather furniture was arranged to take advantage of the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the view beyond was the kind of thing that should have been on postcards. Mountains and forest and endless sky. But scattered throughout were signs of Tyler's occupation, his college sports memorabilia on the shelves, his jackets thrown carelessly over chairs, empty bottles of expensive whiskey lined up on the wet bar like trophies, framed photos of him and his friends skiing, hiking, lounging on the deck with drinks in hand. He hadn't just been visiting. He'd been living here, making it his own, erasing any trace of me. My family was gathered in the living room like defendants awaiting a verdict. My father sat slumped in an armchair, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. My mother stood by the window, arms crossed, chin, lifted, her face set in an expression of stubborn defiance that I had seen 1,000 times before. Tyler paced near the fireplace, running his hands through his hair, looking like a caged animal that had finally realized the bars were closing in. "Finally," my mother said when we entered, her voice dripping with false patience. "Can we please get this ridiculous charade over with?" "By all means," Grandpa gestured to his lawyer. "Mr. Mitchell, if you would." The lawyer stepped forward, a distinguished man in an expensive suit, and opened his briefcase on the coffee table. "I'll keep this simple for everyone's benefit. We have documentation proving that the property transfer from Harper Whitmore to Tyler Whitmore was executed with a forged signature. The forensic analysis is conclusive and would hold up in any court in the country." He laid the report on the table like a verdict. Tyler stopped pacing. "That's not... I mean, I had permission. Mom said it was all handled. She said Harper signed off on everything." "Permission from whom?" Mitchell asked calmly. "Not from the legal owner, not from Harper, and certainly not from Mr. Whitmore, who purchased this property specifically for his granddaughter and whose name appears nowhere on any transfer documents. This is instant." My mother's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "We're family. We don't need lawyers and forensic analyses to sort out a simple property disagreement. This is exactly the kind of thing that should be handled privately, not dragged through the courts like common criminals." "This isn't a disagreement, Kim." Grandpa's voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. "This is fraud, forgery, theft. These are crimes regardless of who commits them." "Crimes," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just desperation dressed up as contempt. "You're seriously going to press charges against your own grandson? Your own flesh and blood?" "If necessary." The room went very quiet. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. "This is your fault." Tyler whirled on my mother, his composure shattering like a window hit by a rock. "You said no one would ever find out. You said Grandpa was too old to notice. You said Harper was too stupid and too beaten down to ever question anything." "Tyler." My mother's voice carried a warning. "No," he was almost shouting now. "I'm not taking the fall for this alone. Not when you planned everything." He turned to Grandpa, desperation bleeding through his carefully cultivated charm. "She came up with the whole thing. She told me what to do. She found someone to forge the signature. I just signed where she told me to sign. I just did what she said." "You're pathetic." My mother's mask finally completely dropped. The loving mother, the concerned parent, the pillar of the community. All of it fell away like a snake shedding its skin, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. You had one job. One simple job. Keep your mouth shut and enjoy the property. But you couldn't even do that, could you? You had to post photos on social media. You had to bring your idiot friends here for parties. You had to leave a trail a mile wide for anyone who bothered to look. I didn't know we'd get caught. We wouldn't have gotten caught if you hadn't been so careless. I watched them tear into each other, these people who had spent my entire life making me feel small, making me feel invisible, making me feel like I was the problem, the disappointment, the one who didn't measure up. Chris, Grandpa's voice was quiet, but my father flinched like he'd been struck. Did you know about this? My father looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. His hands were shaking where they rested on his knees. I suspected. After a while, there were signs. His voice cracked. But Kim said, she said it was for the best. That Harper wouldn't know what to do with a property like this. That Tyler would take care of it, appreciate it, make something of it. And you believed her. I wanted to. The words came out broken. I wanted to believe my wife wasn't capable of this. Harper. My mother turned to me, and for a moment her expression shifted. Something that might have been desperation, or might have been the next move in a chess game she'd been playing my whole life. Harper, sweetheart, let's talk about this. Just you and me, mother and daughter, family. Don't. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Don't call me sweetheart. Don't pretend you care about me. Not now, not after everything. But I do care about you. I'm your mother. Everything I've ever done has been for this family. You stole from me. I was protecting the family's interests, maximizing resources, making sure everything went to the person best equipped to use it. You were protecting Tyler. You've always protected Tyler. I felt something shift inside me, something that had been locked away for 26 years straining against its cage. And you've always sacrificed me. My mother's eyes hardened. The desperation vanished, replaced by something calculating and cold. Fine, she said. You want the truth? Here's the truth. She stepped closer to me, her voice dropping to something intimate and cruel. You were never going to amount to anything, Harper. I knew it from the time you were 5 years old. Tyler had drive, ambition, potential. You had nothing. Just a dreamy little girl who couldn't focus on anything for more than 5 minutes, who couldn't finish what she started, who was never going to be anything but a disappointment. The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing in a place that had been bruised so many times it should have been numb, but it wasn't numb. It still hurt. God, it still hurt so much. So go ahead. She spread her arms wide. Press charges, drag this through the courts, destroy this family completely. But ask yourself, Harper, is a building really worth losing everything? Is revenge really worth tearing apart the only family you have? I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She was right. If I did this, there would be no going back. My family would be destroyed. My brother might go to prison. My father would never recover. Was it worth it? For property? For revenge? Maybe. My voice was small, defeated. The voice of the girl I had always been. Maybe we can work something out. My mother's smile widened. Victory in her eyes. She had won. Again. No, the word came from my grandfather, quiet, firm, absolute. No, Harper. He walked over to me and I saw something fierce in his eyes, something protective and unbreakable. This is not about a building. This was never about a building. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the receipt, the one from 15 years ago. He unfolded it carefully, reverently, and held it up so everyone could see. Do you know why I bought this property for you, Harper? Do you remember what you said to me that day on my porch? The memory surfaced, clear as crystal, sharp as broken glass. His porch. The summer heat pressing down like a weight. The old camera in his weathered hands. The photos that seemed to glow with their own light. Mountains and sky and a cabin that looked like something from a dream. I said it looked like a place where I could finally breathe, I whispered. You said it looked like a place where you could finally breathe. Grandpa's voice was thick with emotion. You were 11 years old, Harper. 11. And you already knew what it felt like to suffocate, to be invisible, to be made small by the people who were supposed to love you. He turned to look at my mother and his eyes held no warmth, no forgiveness. I bought this villa because I wanted you to have somewhere safe, somewhere that was yours and yours alone, somewhere no one could take from you or hold over you or use to control you. And they took it anyway, I said. They tried to take it. Grandpa's jaw set like stone. But they failed. Because I kept this receipt, because I kept every document, because I never forgot what I promised my granddaughter even when she was made to forget. He pressed the receipt into my hands. The paper was soft from years of being folded and unfolded, read and reread. A promise on paper. A promise kept. This isn't about property, Harper. This is about them thinking they could erase you, make you disappear, pretend you didn't matter, pretend you didn't deserve what was yours. His voice hardened into something I had never heard before. I won't let that stand, not while I'm still breathing. Something shifted inside me. The doubt, the guilt, the lifetime of being told I wasn't enough. It didn't disappear. 26 years of damage doesn't vanish in a moment. But something else rose up beside it. Something stronger, anger, real righteous anger. I turned to face my mother. She was still smiling, but there was uncertainty in her eyes now. A flicker of something that might have been fear. She had expected me to fold. I always folded. I was the easy one, the quiet one, the one who kept the peace at any cost, not this time. You're right about one thing, I said, and my voice didn't shake. Not even a little. I was a dreamy little girl. I couldn't focus. I didn't have drive or ambition or whatever it is you valued so much in Tyler. My mother's smile flickered like a candle in a draft. But I remember things. I held up the receipt this paper promised that had survived 15 years of waiting. I remember Grandpa showing me photos when I was 11. I remember him promising me a place where I could breathe. I remember every single time you made me feel like I was nothing, like I was less than nothing. I stepped closer to her, close enough to see the lines around her eyes, the cracks in her carefully maintained facade. You thought I would forget. You thought I would let this go because I let everything else go, because I was easy, quiet, the daughter who never caused trouble. I turned to the lawyer. Mr. Mitchell, what are my options? He cleared his throat. Criminal charges for forgery, civil suit for property recovery and damages. Both carry significant penalties under Colorado law. Harper, Tyler's voice was desperate pleading. Harper, please, I'll do anything. I'll pay you back. I'll sign everything over right now. Just don't send me to prison. I looked at my brother, the golden child, the favorite, the one who had everything handed to him his entire life, reduced to begging. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because for 26 years I stayed quiet. I kept the peace. I made myself small so everyone else could be comfortable. I looked at each of them, my mother, my father, my brother, the family that had never really seen me. Not anymore, I turned to Mr. Mitchell. File everything. 3 weeks later, I stood on the deck of my villa. My villa. The words still felt strange in my mind, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit yet. But they would. In time they would. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The air smelled like pine needles and wood smoke and possibility. Everything was quiet except for the wind in the trees and the distant call of birds settling in for the night. So much had changed in 3 weeks. The property had been officially transferred back to my name. All of Tyler's belongings had been removed, packed into boxes, and shipped to whatever apartment he was renting now. The sports memorabilia was gone. The whiskey bottles were gone. The photos of him and his friends were gone. It was mine again, really mine. Tyler was facing felony forgery charges, though his lawyers were negotiating a plea deal that would probably keep him out of prison, probation, community service, a permanent criminal record that would follow him for the rest of his life. The golden child finally tarnished. My mother wasn't speaking to me. She had blocked my number, unfriended me on social media, and told everyone who would listen that I had betrayed my own family over money, that I had destroyed everything out of petty jealousy, that I was dead to her. Strange how little that hurt. Maybe because she had made me feel dead for years already. My father had reached out once, a text message that said simply, I'm sorry, I should have protected you, I should have done better. I didn't respond, not yet. Maybe someday when the wounds weren't so fresh, but not yet. The door behind me opened. Footsteps on the deck. Beautiful evening. Grandpa came to stand beside me at the railing, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered me one, and I took it gratefully. It really is. We stood in silence for a while, watching the sunset turn the mountains to gold. Comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled with words. Your grandmother would have loved this place, he said finally. She always wanted a house in the mountains, somewhere quiet, somewhere away from the noise. I wish I could have met her. She would have adored you. He smiled, and this time it was his real smile. Warm, kind, full of love. She had that same quiet strength you have. That same way of watching and waiting and knowing exactly when to act. I should have acted sooner. You acted when it mattered. He put his hand on my shoulder. That's what counts. The last sliver of sun disappeared behind the mountains. The sky deepened from gold to purple to the deep blue of approaching night. Stars were beginning to emerge more than I had ever seen from my apartment in the city. What will you do now? Grandpa asked. I thought about it, about the life I had been living, the cramped apartment, the soul-crushing job, the family that had never seen my worth. And then I thought about this place, these mountains, this sky. I'm going to breathe, I said. Grandpa smiled. For 26 years, I had been invisible. Not anymore. Never again.
Em ngồi dưới á, chị chính á. Chị mang có 2 bài nữa kìa.